Imagine for a moment that everything you thought you knew about the origins of Christianity, about Jesus, about Mary Magdalene, and about the sacred story passed down through centuries was incomplete. Imagine that behind the veil of official history lies a truth so powerful that it could shake the very foundations of the church, religion, and perhaps even your own understanding of spirituality. What if Jesus, the figure venerated as divine, also lived as a man of profound love, leaving a hidden legacy that has been carefully guarded, concealed, and even suppressed for centuries? What if Mary Magdalene was not simply the repentant sinner depicted by tradition, but the bearer of a sacred bloodline and the mother of his child? This is not just a myth or conspiracy whispered in hidden chambers. Throughout history, courageous scholars, mystics, and seekers have suggested that a secret truth has been deliberately obscured. And in this journey we are beginning together, we will uncover the mystery of the daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, a story that has been silenced but not destroyed. By the end of this video, we will arrive at the most powerful revelation of all, one that could completely change how you see spirituality, divinity, and even your own role in the unfolding mystery of existence. Before we dive deep, I invite you to subscribe to this channel, leave a like, comment your reflections, and share this video. By engaging, you help spread this knowledge further, ensuring that truths hidden in the shadows come back to light. I promise you that what you will discover here is not just history, but revelation. And the last insight which we will reach together is the most important of them all. Now let us step into the heart of this mystery. To understand the possibility of a daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, we must first dismantle centuries of narratives shaped by powerful institutions. The early church fathers, in their effort to unify the faith, selected what texts would enter the canon of the Bible, discarding and banning others that did not align with their vision. These suppressed writings, known as apocryphal or gnostic gospels, paint a very different picture of Mary Magdalene. In the Gospel of Philip, discovered in the Nag Hammadi library in Egypt in 1945, Mary is described not as a mere follower, but as the closest companion of Jesus, the one he loved more than the others, and the one to whom he revealed the deepest mysteries. This already raises questions. Why would such intimacy be emphasized if she was only a disciple among many? Why would Jesus share secret teachings with her, unless her role was far more significant than what tradition allows? Elaine Pagels, a renowned historian of religion, has pointed out that these Gnostic texts show Mary not as a marginal figure, but as a central pillar of early Christian spirituality, a woman of wisdom, authority, and closeness to the Master. If we consider this, then the possibility of a union between Jesus and Mary Magdalene is no longer absurd, but natural. Love, companionship, and the sharing of sacred mysteries are human realities. Why would the man who preached love as the greatest commandment be forbidden from living it in its most intimate form? And here we reach a key question for you, dear seeker. If Jesus truly had a daughter, what would that mean to you? Would it diminish his divinity, or would it make his message even more powerful, showing that divinity can be fully united with humanity? Reflect on this and share your thoughts in the comments. There are many traditions that whisper of this bloodline. Medieval legends in France speak of Mary Magdalene fleeing across the Mediterranean after the crucifixion, carrying not only secret teachings, but also a sacred child. These stories became entwined with the mystery of the Holy Grail. As noted by scholars like Margaret Starbird, the Grail was not originally imagined as a cup, but as a symbol of the womb, the vessel of life, the bearer of sacred blood. Could it be that the Grail legend was actually pointing to the hidden lineage of Jesus and Mary? The possibility becomes even more striking when we consider how fiercely the Church moved against any suggestion of this truth. The Cathars of southern France, a mystical Christian group of the 12th century, spoke of secret teachings and a more intimate understanding of the Christ and Magdalene. For this, they were brutally persecuted and annihilated in what became known as the Albigensian Crusade. Why would the Church dedicate so much energy to silence them, if not to erase a dangerous memory? Let us pause here and consider, if this truth is real, what would it mean for the structure of religion? If Jesus had a daughter, then the bloodline carries the sacred within human flesh. It means divinity was never meant to be distant, unreachable, or trapped in temples. It means the message of Jesus was that the kingdom of God is within us, and that the sacred continues through humanity itself. As we move forward, we will uncover how this secret was preserved in hidden codes, sacred art, and even esoteric societies that dared to pass the truth across generations. But remember, the greatest revelation is still ahead, waiting at the end of our journey. The trail of hidden history does not end with whispers of Mary Magdalene escaping across the Mediterranean. In fact, when we follow these traces, we begin to see how myth, legend, and coded symbolism overlap, pointing again and again toward the possibility of a sacred bloodline. Let us journey deeper. Consider the south of France, a land filled with mysterious chapels, coded frescoes, and legends about the arrival of Mary Magdalene after the crucifixion. According to local tradition, she landed at the shores of Provence with companions, carrying with her profound secrets. Some accounts even claim she brought a child, hidden from the world, the direct heir of a divine union. Over the centuries, her presence became enshrined in churches, relics, and pilgrimages, though often cloaked in symbols that only initiates could fully understand. The idea of a hidden daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene is not simply a modern theory. Medieval lore, encoded in the stories of the Knights Templar and in the mysterious geometry of cathedrals, hints at truths kept away from ordinary believers. The Templars, those warrior monks who rose to immense influence in the 12th and 13th centuries, are believed by some historians to have uncovered sacred knowledge during their time in Jerusalem. What did they find beneath the Temple Mount? Many esoteric traditions suggest they discovered documents or relics that confirmed the existence of a holy bloodline, knowledge so dangerous that it contributed to their sudden downfall at the hands of the French crown and the Pope. But there is more. Art itself became a secret language for transmitting hidden truths. Leonardo da Vinci, centuries later, embedded clues in his paintings. The Last Supper, studied by countless researchers, has been interpreted as a deliberate portrayal of Mary Magdalene seated at the side of Jesus, rather than the Apostle John. Her presence, with feminine features and symbolic posture, suggests a recognition of her true role as more than a follower, a partner. Could Leonardo, a man deeply immersed in esoteric traditions, have been encoding the suppressed story of the bloodline? Ask yourself this: why would such symbolism appear across centuries again and again unless there was a truth demanding to be preserved, even under threat of persecution? Why would artists, mystics, and secret societies risk encoding dangerous knowledge unless they were carrying forward a flame that institutions sought to extinguish? Scholar Margaret Starbird, who studied the Grail traditions, writes that the very concept of the Sangreal, the Holy Grail, was originally sang real, meaning royal blood. According to this interpretation, the Grail was not a cup, but a lineage. This transforms the entire understanding of Christian myth. The Grail becomes the daughter, the sacred vessel carrying divine life into the world. Imagine the power of that symbol, a bloodline uniting the human and the divine, a continuation of Christ's mission in flesh and blood. We must pause here and reflect. If the Grail is indeed the bloodline, then the search for it was never about a relic to be found, but about rediscovering the truth of humanity's own divine inheritance. Does this idea stir something in you? Share in the comments what you feel when you consider that perhaps divinity was never meant to be distant, but present within us, passed through generations, hidden yet alive. Now let us look closer at the role of Mary Magdalene herself. For centuries, she was reduced to the label of sinner, a woman in need of forgiveness. But historians like Karen King of Harvard Divinity School have shown that early Christian communities viewed her as a teacher, a leader, and the recipient of secret revelations. In the Gospel of Mary, another suppressed text, she is the one who comforts the disciples after the death of Jesus, reminding them of his true teachings when even Peter falters. This suggests a position of authority equal, if not superior, to the male apostles. Why then would her role be diminished so dramatically in later tradition? The answer may lie in the threat she represented. If Mary Magdalene was the true partner of Jesus, if she carried his child, then the power of succession would not be in the hands of bishops and popes, but in the hands of a family, a lineage carrying divine legitimacy. The suppression of her role was not only theological, but political. It was about control of authority. By erasing her, by reducing her to a repentant prostitute, the Church effectively removed the possibility of an alternative center of power rooted in the sacred feminine and in bloodline. And yet, traces remain. Legends in the Languedoc region of France, where the Cathars thrived, speak of sacred families and descendants carrying ancient knowledge. The Cathars themselves, who believed in a purer, more mystical Christianity, honored Mary Magdalene and her connection to Christ. For this, they were exterminated. In the siege of Montségur in 1244, hundreds of Cathars chose to die rather than surrender. According to some accounts, a small group escaped with a mysterious treasure, said not to be gold, but knowledge, perhaps even records of the bloodline. Does this sound like myth, or does it feel like memory hidden beneath the surface of history? Ask yourself, why do these stories refuse to die? Why do they continue to resurface generation after generation, in legends, in art, in whispers carried through time? Could it be that humanity at its core remembers? We are only beginning to touch the edges of this mystery. But as we proceed, the picture will grow clearer. We will explore how this sacred truth about the daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene has shaped spiritual traditions, esoteric brotherhoods, and even the very notion of divine inheritance. And remember, the most important revelation is still waiting for us at the end of this journey. As we dig deeper into the suppressed traditions and hidden currents of history, a pattern begins to emerge, one of secrecy, protection, and transmission of forbidden knowledge. The story of the daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene did not vanish. It was woven into the fabric of esoteric orders, encoded in myths, and passed down in ways that only the initiated could understand. Think of the Renaissance, an era when knowledge long buried in the shadows resurfaced. This was not only the rebirth of art and science, but also the revival of hidden spiritual traditions. Secret societies like the Rosicrucians emerged during this period, declaring themselves guardians of ancient wisdom. Their manifestos spoke of secret knowledge that would one day transform humanity, and their symbols echoed the union of the sacred masculine and feminine, the sun and the rose, the chalice and the sword. Could these symbols be subtle acknowledgments of the bloodline of Christ and Magdalene? Esoteric scholar Lynn Picknett argued that the sacred feminine was deliberately concealed but always preserved, often encoded in alchemical imagery. In alchemy, the philosopher's stone is not just a material treasure but the union of opposites, male and female, spirit and matter. When understood through this lens, the alchemical marriage mirrors the sacred union of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, producing not only spiritual enlightenment, but, according to legend, a living child, the embodiment of divine balance. But what of this daughter? What do the stories tell us? In French lore, she is often referred to as Sarah, sometimes called Sarah la Kali. In the town of Sainte-Marie-de-la-Mer in Provence, a mysterious celebration continues to this day, honoring Saint Sarah, the dark-skinned daughter said to have arrived with Mary Magdalene. To the Romani people, she is revered as their patron saint, a figure of deep mystical power. Some scholars suggest that this Sarah represents the living memory of the sacred bloodline, disguised in legend but never erased. Pause here and reflect. Could it be that a folk festival in a small French town is in fact the remnant of one of the greatest suppressed truths of all time? Does this possibility awaken something in you, a sense that truth, no matter how deeply buried, finds a way to surface through symbol, story, and devotion? The idea of Sarah as the daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene may sound radical, but when placed alongside the coded traditions of the Grail, the Cathar legends, and the persistence of her cult, the picture becomes harder to dismiss. And ask yourself, why has the Church for centuries turned a blind eye to these traditions, treating them as mere folklore, rather than acknowledging their deeper significance? Could silence itself be a form of acknowledgement? Now consider how this possibility reshapes spirituality. If Jesus had a daughter, if the bloodline continued, then divinity is no longer locked away in a distant heaven or monopolized by an institution. It means divinity flowed into the world through family, through love, through the sacred feminine. It means the message of Christ was not only about redemption through sacrifice, but about the union of spirit and flesh, heaven and earth, male and female. Think of the empowerment this would bring, especially to those marginalized for centuries. The recognition of Mary Magdalene as more than a disciple, as the partner and mother of a sacred child, restores the balance between masculine and feminine in spirituality. It reveals that women, too, are bearers of divine authority, wisdom, and creation. No longer is the sacred solely the domain of patriarchs and priests. It is shared, it is human, it is alive. Scholar Lawrence Gardner, in his controversial works, spoke of the hidden dynasty, a lineage descending from Jesus and Mary Magdalene that interwove with European royal families. While mainstream historians dismiss such claims, the persistence of these ideas points to an undeniable fascination. Why? Because they suggest that spirituality is not abstract, but incarnate, that the divine was not meant to remain in heaven, but to walk the earth through generations of living blood. Let us also remember that many traditions across the world speak of divine figures leaving descendants. In Hinduism, gods walk the earth as avatars. In Judaism, messianic hope is tied to lineage, to the house of David. Why then should it be so unthinkable that Jesus, a Jewish teacher rooted in these traditions, might also have left behind a child? Pause once more and ask yourself, what would it mean if the true Holy Grail was not a relic of the past, but a lineage that continues perhaps even to this day? Would it change how you pray, how you see yourself, how you live your life? Would it bring the divine closer, more real, more present within the human story? Share in the comments your reflections, for this is not only a historical question, it is a deeply spiritual one. And yet we are not at the end. The most powerful revelation is still waiting, a truth that transcends bloodlines and challenges everything we have been taught. Stay with me, for as we step into the final part of this journey, the ultimate meaning of this mystery will unfold, and it may transform your understanding of divinity forever. We have traveled through suppressed scriptures, legends of the Grail, whispers of Sarah, and the veiled traditions of secret societies. Piece by piece, a tapestry has unfolded, the possibility that Jesus and Mary Magdalene shared a union that bore a daughter, and that this truth was hidden to protect both the bloodline and the spiritual revolution it represented. Yet now we must reach beyond the question of history and lineage to uncover the deepest meaning of all. Because whether or not we can prove the existence of Sarah, whether or not we can trace an unbroken line of descent, the true revelation lies not only in genealogy, but in what the idea itself unlocks within us. Think about this. If the divine was passed on in human blood, then the sacred is not far away, locked in heaven or monopolized by an institution. It lives in the human body, in family, in generations, in love. The very possibility that Jesus fathered a child breaks the false wall between sacred and human, showing us that the divine is not abstract, but incarnate. The kingdom of heaven is not distant, it is alive within us. The greatest threat of this truth was never political. It was spiritual, because if the sacred lives in flesh and blood, then you too are a bearer of divinity. You too are part of the living Grail, and this is the revelation that cannot be controlled. Institutions can suppress texts, burn heretics, silence voices, but they cannot erase the truth written in the human soul. The spark of God dwells within you. The legend of the daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene is at its heart a mirror. It reveals the sacred feminine long suppressed, reminding us that balance between masculine and feminine is the key to wholeness. It reminds us that love, not hierarchy, was the true foundation of Christ's teaching. And it reminds us that our bodies, our blood, our lives are not separate from divinity. They are its expression. Ask yourself this. If you carry the same divine essence that Jesus carried, how would you live your life differently? Would you speak your truth with more courage? Would you treat others with greater reverence? Would you see your own lineage, your parents, your children, your ancestors, as sacred vessels of an unbroken chain of divinity? This is the ultimate revelation, and it is far more powerful than any hidden archive or secret document. The bloodline of Christ is not only about a daughter born 2,000 years ago, it is about the awakening of humanity to its true inheritance. The Grail is not lost because it is not a relic to be found. It is within us, here and now, waiting to be recognized. The mystics understood this. The Cathars who died at Montségur whispered as they perished, "The kingdom of God is within you." The Gnostic texts banned by the Church taught the same truth, that enlightenment is not granted by external authorities, but discovered within one's own soul. And even the most radical interpretations of the Grail legends point to this same conclusion. The treasure was never material. It was always spiritual, carried in human hearts and passed through living memory. Perhaps Sarah existed. Perhaps the bloodline of Jesus continues through history, hidden in plain sight. But the revelation that matters most is this: whether through blood or through spirit, the divine lineage continues in you. You are the continuation of the sacred story. You are the vessel. You are the Grail. Let that truth sink deeply, because when you awaken to it, your life cannot remain the same. The sacred feminine and masculine unite within you. The human and divine are reconciled within your being. The veil between heaven and earth dissolves. And suddenly, the hidden truth about the daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene is no longer just history. It becomes a living reality in your own existence. Now I invite you to reflect. What does this revelation awaken in you? Does it stir awe, resistance, curiosity? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice is part of this unfolding conversation. If this journey has moved you, remember to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and share this video with those who are ready to hear the hidden truths. By doing so, you become part of the mission to restore balance, to honor both the sacred masculine and feminine, and to awaken humanity to its true inheritance. And never forget, the last and greatest truth is not simply that Jesus and Mary Magdalene may have had a daughter. The greatest truth is that you are the living continuation of the divine story. The Grail is within you. The kingdom of God is not in temples of stone or institutions of power. It is alive in your very soul. Carry this truth with reverence and let it transform how you see yourself, others, and the universe. For when you awaken to it, life itself becomes sacred, and the mystery that has been hidden for centuries finally reveals its eternal light. Thanks for looking.